This is Sky News Live in North London, where thousands of residents of 4 tower blocks spent the night in emergency accommodation following urgent concerns over fire safety. The cladding on some 27 high-rise blocks in 15 local authorities has now failed tests carried out in the wake of the Grenfell Tower disaster. Here, 650 households were evacuated after Camden Council said it could not guarantee people's safety.
I know it's difficult, but Grenfell changes everything, and I just don't believe we can take any risks with our residents' safety, and I have to put them first.
Some refuse to be moved, but officials say they will now be forced to leave and could be out of their homes for as long as 4 weeks.
I think it's disgusting that it's been left till 8:30, 9 o'clock at night to start getting people out. Where are we all going?
We're live throughout the day amid chaotic scenes and confusion over where everyone else is going to be housed. A very good afternoon to you. Join us here from Swiss Cottage in North London. I'm at the Leisure Centre, where residents from the nearby Chalcots estate have spent the night after being told to leave their homes over safety fears following the fire at Grenfell Tower. That was just a few miles away from here. Thousands of people live on this estate. The local council has said that 83 households have chosen to stay, but now they are going to be forced to leave. And it's not just here. The government has confirmed today that 27 tower blocks in 15 local authority areas across England have failed the cladding fire test commissioned in the wake of the Grenfell disaster. But the affected towers here on Adelaide Road in the Swiss Cottage area of London. At 8 p.m. last night, Camden Council announced the evacuation of Taplow, a 23-storey tower. Residents of Burnham, Bray and Dorney Towers were also told to leave their homes later on in the evening. And a 5th tower, Blashford House, was initially evacuated too, but the council later said residents of that building could return home. But the leader of Camden Council, Georgia Gould, explained to my colleague Stephen Dixon why the decision to evacuate was made so late in the day, and defending criticism from families disgusted at the way things were handled.
Yeah, look, we had a conversation with the fire services at 5 p.m. yesterday, and they said the blocks weren't safe to stay in. I said that it's going to be so difficult to move residents overnight on a Friday. Is there anything I can do to make these blocks safe? You know, I offered to pay for fire engines outside all of the blocks. We've already had 24/7 wardens. We were prepared to do anything we could to keep people there while we did the immediate works. Their advice was there was nothing we could do to keep them safe. So we had a huge effort, you know, with 1 hour's notice. We've had 650 households have moved out. We've had everyone come together, Camden staff, volunteers. Of course there have been difficulties, of course it's distressing, but I think, you know, people, those 650 households are now in different accommodation.
So where are people now? I mean, is it a case of getting them into hotels for a couple of nights and then seeing where you go from there?
So many people have chosen to go with friends and family, and obviously we're encouraging that, but those who can't or don't want to, we've taken them to the 2 rest centres. We've had about 100 people staying in the rest centres. We've had some people in hotels just as a temporary measure, about 270 hotel rooms booked. But obviously we want to get people into more secure accommodation over the next couple of weeks, and our message to individuals is to come back to this Swiss Cottage Centre to register their details, and we will support them into that temporary accommodation.
But what are the options there? I mean, can you keep people locally? Is it that people are going to have to be spread across London?
Yeah, so we've been building new social housing, and one of our blocks we've expedited getting that open. So that's 100 places in Camden. We've got different properties that aren't currently occupied that we're going to be asking to go into, but obviously we've asked other neighbouring boroughs as well whether they can provide extra support. So we're calling in as much help as we can and to get people housed safely.
Now, just after that interview, Georgina Gould had a confrontation with a 72-year-old woman with medical issues who's been forced to sit in a chair all night long, and she was still waiting for accommodation.
Started immediately getting people down to the blocks to knock on doors and tell people, and people were knocking on doors, and I don't know what happened in your particular place, but you know, obviously if I had more time, we would have convened a meeting, discussed the advice with residents, and decided together, because that's how we always want to do things. But we just had to act quickly.
I am having a pop at you in a funny kind of way, but I am so absolutely stressed. Why was hotels not looked at before we were all evacuated? I've sat in a chair over here since 9 o'clock last night. I'm 72 years old, suffer with emphysema. Now I'm being told they can't rehouse me because I've got a dog. What do they want me to do with my dog? Put my dog to sleep?
We definitely can get you housing for your dog.
But when?
We've got hotel rooms identified at the moment, so what we'll do is we'll go down, we'll talk to the team. I know that there are over 100 hotel rooms that are waiting for people, so let's go down, have a discussion, and we'll find somewhere for you.
Yeah, but what year are you coming back to me? I can't sit here all day.
We're coming down back to you right now.
Sorry, can I come in now? I'm her daughter, 72 years old, and you've allowed her to sit in a chair with her dog, and she's stressing more for her dog than anything, and you've allowed this to happen. We keep going back, and I've just gone into them and said about the travel lodge, and they weren't aware the travel lodge took animals. Why didn't you look into places and think about animals?
Yeah.
I think animal people need to come in to see what Camden are looking at, just residents and not animals.
I know that the people who've gone into hotel rooms with dogs, there's obviously been an issue here.
No, there isn't. There's only one dog.
Yeah.
I'm just going to tell you about this now, and you will not believe what I'm going to tell you. One woman walked out of here with a dog last night that doesn't live in one of the 4 tower blocks, but you rehoused her in a hotel.
Okay, well let's go down. Let's find the staff and let's get you a hotel which will have your dog.
But for this long now, you've allowed them to be living in that property that's been dangerous.
Can I help?
How?
Can I help?
How's it happened?
We'll move it on. Let's go.
Let's go.
Well, it all got pretty heated there, and since that confrontation, Councillor Georgia Gould has released a statement. I want to read you a bit of that now. She said having to evacuate people from their homes is always going to be distressing for those residents, especially when we have to do it at such short notice. She went on to say, I know some residents are angry and upset, but I want to be very clear that Camden Council acted to protect them. Grenfell changed everything, and when told our blocks were unsafe to remain in, we acted. Well, displaced residents have spent the morning trying to find out information and much needed accommodation.
The guy came and knocked at the door at 1 o'clock in the morning, and the old people, she's 79, my dad is 85. He cannot even carry himself. He's blind on one eye, the other one is 30% left, so he can barely see, he can barely walk. They're panicking because they don't know where to go, and they have not slept all night, so I don't know.
How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm all right. It's the same feeling, yeah, worried or something like that, yeah.
I'm only here on holiday for a week. I'm from Australia, but I'm worried for them. I'm really worried for them.
People have had to decide, in a few minutes, how all their possessions, what to do with them and what they might need, I don't know, for an indefinite period of time.
Obviously, this should have been done prior to installation, obviously. So, better safe than sorry, I suppose.
I don't know why I decided to have a look at the news, because I couldn't go back to sleep. And then I saw on the TV that we were being evacuated. And I thought, is this a joke? Is this for real? I didn't hear anything. No neighbours touching, no letters from the council, nothing. So this morning I'm trying to find out. I'm going to the sports centre. They tell you 2 to 4 weeks. I spoke to somebody from the council on Thursday because she was handing in letters saying that everything was fine. They discovered something that could be potentially dangerous, and in the following weeks they will have a look at it, but it will all be fine. So I thought that's fine. And then today this is what's happening.
We just now got to go down there now to see what's going on. So we've got nowhere to go. We don't know. We've been told that they're sending people to Hackney, all over the place, to people in hotels, but I don't know, nothing. No one's really told us what's going on.
We heard from some of the residents there, clearly very frustrated. Let's bring in now Andrew Gwynn, who is the Shadow Communities Secretary. Good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. You heard many frustrated people there. What is your reaction in terms of how this has been dealt with?
Well, of course, I understand their frustrations, because to be told that your apartments are unsafe must be one of the most frightening experiences for them, and then to be left unsure about their future, unsure about what is going to happen, and with little information. I'm sure the local authorities doing all that they can, but for those people that are directly affected, of course, it's the immediate, it's the there and now, and they feel as though more should be done to help them, and I understand those concerns. But I also think this raises some bigger questions, because whilst Grenfell has certainly changed everything, and we have to absolutely make sure that all the homes in this country are fit for habitation and are safe, it does raise some very serious questions as to why some of these defects, setting aside obviously the cladding, which only came to light after the dreadful instance at Grenfell, but some of the other issues about fire doors, about gas pipes and so on, really ought to have been picked up on other fire safety reviews.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, I was in Plymouth yesterday. There were 3 blocks there that are having their cladding removed. They are among 27 up and down the country. How was this not picked up in the first place? I mean, some of these blocks have had cladding on them for decades.
Well, of course, one would have hoped that this would have been picked up through the planning process and certainly through the building control process. And I think we now have to have a very close look at the resources made available to local authority planning departments to ensure that in future they have the appropriate resources to be able to adequately fulfil their building control obligations, because it's quite clear that materials that shouldn't have been used have been used. Renovations that have been conducted in those tower blocks, not just the cladding but other things like the doors, like the pipes and so on, really ought to have been picked up, both in terms of building control checks, but also some of the more recent fire safety checks that should take place on a frequent basis.
And what are your thoughts on the government's reaction to how they handled Grenfell Tower fire?
Well, clearly they were very slow to react, and I would hope that the situation on the ground has improved since the government took much more of an interest. I think that Kensington and Chelsea Council were woeful in the way that they dealt with the immediate aftermath, and what it shows is that local authorities, not all local authorities, but some local authorities, really don't have the capacity to deal with major incidents like this. And we have to look, I think, again, very carefully at how we resource local authorities, how we get emergency planning in place and well resourced. And we've got to now stop, I think, some of the cuts to fire services across the country. We've also got to make sure, as I say, that planning and building control is well resourced as well, because corners cannot be cut when it comes to public safety.
And how about some of these other blocks? What's going to happen there?
Well, this is a real concern, because not only for residents that are living in those blocks, uncertain about whether they are going to be moved out, as has happened in Camden, but it also highlights the very real housing crisis that we have in this country, because there isn't a never-ending supply of alternative accommodation to rehouse these people within the same communities. And so what this really does highlight is that if you have to all of a sudden rehouse several hundred people within a given community, there isn't a stock for them to be rehoused into. And it really does highlight why we need to build more homes in this country for rent, because there is a chronic waiting list as it is. And if you take housing out of that stock because it's unsafe, it just exacerbates that problem within certain communities, especially in London and in other big cities.
And we already know there have been cuts to local councils. This is likely to put on a lot more pressure financially, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's where we need clear answers from the government, because certainly as far as Grenfell Tower is concerned, the government has intimated that it will assist the local authority, but that the local authority will have to pick up some of the cost. Now, if this is being rolled out across the country in terms of recladding buildings, making buildings safe, changing the interior of buildings, whether it's doors, pipes, walls, whatever works need doing, that has to be funded, and many of these local authorities have seen a massive squeeze on their own finances and aren't able to fully finance that. So we do need some indication from central government that they are going to make the resources available to all local authorities to be able to make their housing stock fit for purpose.
And we've seen thousands of people here evacuated. Are they being properly looked after?
Well, I would hope that they are. I think it's obviously a mammoth task for the authorities, but clearly there are individual problems. We've heard about the lady with the dog and whether she's been given appropriate attention. I would hope that the local authority is taking all of these issues seriously, because there are people with medical needs that looking after, there are people with children, families that need looking after, people with disabilities. And I would hope that as part of that emergency planning, local authorities very carefully consider how they treat people if they are going to evacuate their homes, because people can't be left with uncertainty. They need to be given that certainty, and they need to be given the security of a roof over their heads, albeit temporarily.
OK, Andrew Gwynn, thanks very much for your time this afternoon. Now, as we've been speaking about, thousands of people here have been evacuated. That happened about 8 o'clock last night, and many of them have been staying in the leisure centre behind me. I'm going to bring in one of those people now, Kyle Taylor. Thanks very much for joining us. Just talk us through your situation now.
It was really confusing. It was around 9 o'clock. My mum gave me a phone call telling me we were being evacuated, get all your stuff ready as fast as you can. It was about 20 minutes into it, we got a knock from the council saying you need to leave now. We rushed out, we weren't given any time at all to finish off what we were doing. I had to get from the 18th floor with my dog down to the leisure centre. So
you're on one of the top floors, are you?
Yeah, 18th. And there's about 22 floors in it. There's only 2 lifts and 1 flight of stairs, so it was difficult for everyone to get out. We got rushed over to the leisure centre where we saw all the inflatable beds laid out. We weren't really told much of what was happening. It wasn't until later on in the day where we were finding out from other people or from friends and relatives what was actually happening.
Are you pleased that the council have said that you should be evacuated in terms of, you know, the risk that there could be to you and your family?
Slightly. I mean, you know, it's kind of a small sacrifice to pay, considering if we did stay, there was a high chance of either us getting set on fire or the block blowing up from the gas pipe.
Is that something that worried you? Because we've seen so many tower blocks, haven't we, where their cladding isn't fit for purpose,
yeah,
and they need to be replaced.
You try to think that you're going to be one of the lucky ones, it won't happen to you, but it's always in your mind that it can happen at any moment. There's a lot of problems with the blocks, so anything could happen.
And you've been staying in the leisure centre,
yeah,
along with, what, hundreds, thousands of others. How long are you going to be in there for, and what's it like in there?
It's stressful, it's stuffy, beds and people everywhere, not much room to move. They said we're going to be there for about 1 to 2 months.
In the leisure centre?
Yeah, that could be a lot longer, knowing Camden Council.
So they haven't said that they're going to house you in a hotel or other accommodation?
I have a dog, so apparently I'm not allowed to be housed. So I had to take my dog to my mum's house and come here. Part of the Camden Council was saying we will be housed, part is saying we won't. Nobody really knows what's happening. Yeah.
So what's your reaction to the way the council have handled things?
Okay, I mean, it's the first time I've ever noticed the council actually take action on something instead of ignoring it or pushing it under the carpet. It has its positives, but it's a bit stressful. We never got much time to do take stuff. There's still a lot of stuff left at the house. People are in the middle of sleeping, washing. They should have let us know earlier.
OK, well, thanks very much for speaking to us. I hope you get some shelter soon. Take care. Well, you heard the personal side of this, the human side, if you like, but of course there is also a political one. Let's go live now to Westminster and our correspondent Charlotte Lomas. And Charlotte, this is proving to be a very difficult situation for the government, isn't it?
It is, and it's a rapidly developing one, not only what's happening in Camden, but of course the continuing aftermath of the Grenfell fire as well. Now, we have heard from Downing Street, they say that they're monitoring the situation and getting updates. You know, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, is in Liverpool today for Armed Forces Day, but this, as I say, is an evolving situation. We now know there are 27 high-rise buildings across 15 local authority areas in the UK that have had their cladding, they've failed those fire safety tests. So a serious situation evolving. All we've heard from the Prime Minister up to now, as the Camden evacuation was going place, she took to Twitter and she posted this tweet, which I can read to you now. "My thoughts are with residents being evacuated in Camden while their homes are made safe tonight. We will work with and support the emergency services and relevant authorities to safeguard the public. I've asked Sajid Javid, the Community Secretary, to keep me regularly updated and ensure we are offering every support we can to residents and those working on site." We are expecting an update from the Prime Minister shortly, but talking to Sky News a little earlier on, the Community Secretary, Sajid Javid, did say that the evacuation in Camden was difficult and distressing, but the right thing to do.
These are multiple fire safety check failures. These are things that, the failures in the internal building that have nothing to do with the cladding, such as fire doors not being there, auto door closers not being there or having been disenabled. You even had with these towers situations where some of the internal walls were breached. So this kind of issue shouldn't be happening. And as a result, though, right here and now, the most immediate action that needs to happen was that these residents need to be made safe.
There are also some people on the ground asking why, for example, the army hasn't been brought in to help with this crisis management. Perhaps they can help with the logistics and the organisation. There are definitely some big questions that are being asked. And in light of that slow reaction from Theresa May and her government, she was widely criticised for the lack of support after the Grenfell fire. Many will be watching closely just to see their response on this.
OK, Charlotte, thanks very much for that update there. You are watching Sky News. Coming up, we've got all the latest on the fire safety concerns of other tower blocks across the UK. Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. Let's take a look at what's happening in the sport, shall we? Now, we are live in central London in Swiss Cottage, where thousands of residents have had to be evacuated from tower blocks following safety concerns, and that's of course all after the Grenfell fire. So I'm joined now for more on this by the fire risk and safety management expert Stephen Mackenzie. Stephen, thanks very much for joining us. Just talk us through, what are the concerns then with these blocks?
I think the concerns have been following the emergency testing of some of the materials from the Grenfell similar type fires, that the local authority has done a sensible precaution, taken advice from the fire authority, and the fire authority, in agreement with the local authority, has decided to evacuate and decant the buildings.
But what changes are needed to be made to this building now?
Well, without actually seeing the practicalities in the interior of the building, the reports from the witness statements are there's concerns over the external planning materials failed, there are concerns over the internal fire safety measures may be defective, and there's a parallel concern under the gas regulations that there's gas safety issues.
So is this the right decision to evacuate thousands of people? Is it better to be safe?
I think that it's a logical precaution to take in this instance, but there could have been potentially other measures to be put in place, as we've seen in Portsmouth, to allow occupants to remain in place until the extent of the problem and issue was determined. Moreover, when we've had so many other local authority premises identified up and down the country.
And I went to Plymouth yesterday because there's 3 tower blocks there that are going to have the cladding removed, and many residents are terrified, especially those living on the top floors. I mean, it's very difficult to imagine exactly what they are going through, but it must be terrifying.
Yes, the uncertainty of the events that are unfolding, it's almost like a civil contingency catastrophe. It's an absolute PR nightmare for the local authorities and central government, and whereas the governmental assurances that many of these buildings may most likely actually be safe, and some of the cladding systems, as we've seen in Camden on Thursday night, the base insulation is actually potentially a non-combustible material and doesn't need to be removed. So we need some clarity in where we're going.
And this cladding has been in place in some places for decades. How was it that this passed building regulations?
Well, I think there's been some concerns within the community going back to the Scottish fire at Garrett Court that led to the House of Commons public inquiry raising concerns over external fire cladding. But our legislators don't appear to have amended the legislation or identified where the misnomers are occurring to address this issue. We need to review our building standards and our fire safety legislation.
And where do the government go from here then?
The public inquiry is the first step. There'll be a parallel criminal investigation as per the Metropolitan Police announcement, and there'll be coroner court reports on the individual fire fatalities. The government needs to bring in the independent experts, and I'm going to suggest, as we're still part of the European Union, we call in the European experts to look at the national response.
And in your opinion, looking at those horrendous pictures from Grenfell Tower, how was it that it managed to spread quite so quickly?
Well, from the fire footage that we've actually seen in some of the witness statements, there was the external cladding issue, but that's only part of the problems there. The other part was the safe cores and areas not being accessible, and the fire service having to instruct occupants to stay behind that fire door. It's not happened before.
And I was hearing in Plymouth that they are now installing sprinklers, but you would have thought things like that and fire alarms in corridors would have already been in place.
Fire alarms are a sensible precaution. There's no reason why we shouldn't have automatic fire alarm systems in the building. Sprinklers, they're only mandatory for buildings over 30 metres. New buildings, there's no legal requirement, but there may be some societal pressures on local authorities. The sprinkler systems may not have addressed all the external fire issues, but may have improved the safety attributes of the building for the internal occupants and evacuation.
Thank you very much for your time, appreciate that, and all your expertise. You are watching Sky News. Of course, after the break we'll have plenty more from here in Swiss Cottage on the evacuation and, of course, what the local authorities will do next. Welcome back. You join us live from central London. We're in fact in Swiss Cottage, where thousands of people have been evacuated from tower blocks, and this is over concerns about the cladding in the wake of the Grenfell Tower disaster. But it's not just in Camden, where councils are urgently trying to reassure people living in high-rise blocks. There's also issues across the country, and indeed I've been to an estate in Plymouth where 3 blocks are having their cladding removed.
So I love the views, but I'm just not safe at all. And it's lovely living here, but when you don't feel safe, you know, it's a massive worry.
Up on the 13th floor, Kristin Neal lives alone and says she no longer feels safe. The cladding on her tower block will be removed because tests have shown that it's combustible. So what is it that you are mostly worried about then?
I'm worried about the fact that this door is just not.
And is that here, is it?
Yeah, when the door's shut you can feel the air coming in, so if there was a fire the smoke would just come right in.
Kristin says she feels like she's living in a death trap.
I want this block of flat to be safe. You know, I want a fire door. I don't think it's a lot to ask to have a fire door, you know, and I feel like they're kind of saying, yeah, that's priority, we'll get it done, but I've had nothing.
From the top floor it takes 3 minutes to walk to the bottom at a normal pace. But the concrete steps are narrow, and for the elderly and those with disabilities, escaping a fire from so high up will be incredibly difficult.
But the government is... Yeah.
And that's a reality for Claudine Palmer, who lives on the top floor and has asthma.
If it happened in here, you know, I'm up on the 15th floor. How'd you get out? How'd you know?
Have you thought about that? How would you get out?
No. You'd have to stay in the flat, wouldn't you? You'd have to stay here and... Couldn't jump, could I?
Today workmen were boarding up windows in the blocks, and there's now 24-hour security. They're run by a housing association, but when they were first clad,
they were council-owned.
Those cladding panels went up years and years ago. Why was there not more research done into the fact that they could be combustible?
I have absolutely no evidence to suggest that anything other than the correct process and procedure was followed when those cladding panels were affixed.
But you've now tested them, and they are combustible.
I agree, but I can only talk about the situation as it existed.
There has been a fire in the block behind me before, and some residents say they had to crawl out on their hands and knees. And whilst the majority of people say they are worried about safety, some people who spent their lives living here don't want to be rehoused.
High-rise buildings have for decades been a feature of many city landscapes. But since the Grenfell fire tragedy, local authorities are taking every precaution to ensure that they're safe.
Well, that's the situation in Plymouth, but of course here in Swiss Cottage, thousands of people have been evacuated from their homes over issues with safety and the cladding and such like. Many of them are now staying in this leisure centre. One gentleman just told me that he's likely to have to stay there, he says, for up to 2 months. That's what he's been told, he says, from the local council. But of course all this is turning into a bit of a political nightmare, and this morning we have now had reaction on this evacuation from the Prime Minister. Here's Theresa May.
As regards the issue of the flat evacuation that has taken place in Camden in London last night, that is a matter, of course, which the government has been working through with that particular local authority. We are seeing, as a result of what happened in the terrible fire that took place at Grenfell Tower in Kensington, we have urged local authorities to send in samples of cladding and materials on their tower blocks. These have been tested. Many of those have been found not to be up to the fire safety standards that are required, and that is why action has been taken. Now, in some cases, it's possible to take mitigating action, and the fire service are content that the blocks are safe. In others, it's been necessary for people to move out on a temporary basis, and that's what happened in Camden last night. But for those Camden blocks, it wasn't just a question of the cladding. There were a number of issues that came together that meant that the fire service were concerned about those blocks, and the action was taken by the local authority.
You considered that the Grenfell response amounted to a failure of the state. What has been done to avoid that being the case in terms of these evacuations?
Well, I did indeed say I think the initial response to the Grenfell Tower fire was not good enough. That's why the government stepped in. I've been ensuring that we've been providing the capacity, the capability for the Kensington and Chelsea area. We're bringing other people in so that we can see people who've lost their homes from Grenfell Tower fire being rehoused within 3 weeks, offered rehousing within 3 weeks, ensuring that we're providing financial support to people who lost everything. But as part of that also, it's government that has been working with local authorities to ensure that they are inspecting their tower blocks. We have made facilities available for the cladding on the tower blocks where they're concerned about this to be sent in, to be tested. And when those tests find that that cladding is not up to the fire safety standards, immediate action is taken. The government, working with local authorities, working with the fire and rescue service, deciding what to do on each individual case to ensure the safety of people living in those homes. Absolutely, our first priority is people's safety.
And in terms of the people who were evacuated last night, can you guarantee that all those being evacuated over fire safety concerns will be suitably housed, not just put on inflatable mattresses in sports halls? How quickly will this happen? Can you guarantee this?
Well, of course, what needs to happen is the government is talking with Camden Council about how long it will take to ensure that these blocks are able to be safe for people to return to their flats. They're able to go into their flats and pick up belongings that they may wish to gather. People will have taken different steps in terms of where they will have been last night. Some were placed in hotel rooms. We're making sure that the authority has the ability to do what is necessary to ensure that people have somewhere to stay and that the work is done so that those tower blocks will become safe for them to return to in the future.
And
Thank you.
Lastly, can I just ask one more question? Will the government commit to footing all the local authorities' costs in terms of evacuation resources and rehousing? Will this funding come from the recently activated Bellwyn scheme?
Well, the Bellwyn scheme was activated for the local council for the Grenfell Tower. The government is working with those local authorities affected by this issue to ensure that they're able to do what is necessary on the ground to reassure people about the safety of their blocks, if it is necessary to evacuate people and take action to make those tower blocks safe. And the government is supporting local authorities to do that, and together we're making sure that the resources are there to ensure that what is needed to keep people safe is being done.
So there's a reaction from the Prime Minister there to this evacuation. 4 blocks have been evacuated and people taking shelter in this leisure centre that you can see behind me here, many on blow-up beds, many with young children and pets. It's not yet known how long they will have to stay there, but the council is saying it could take between 3 to 4 weeks to do the repair works on the block. So that's the latest here in Swiss Cottage. We will have more at the top of the hour, but for now let's cross back to the Sky News Centre where Kimberly's got an update on the rest of today's news.